Welcome back to another edition of Unblocked. I'm your host, Ronen Passar, and I am thrilled today because we have got an incredible guest for you. Our guest today is the one and only Ryan Reisert, 4X sales leader, 4X founder, author of one of the best books out there you could ever read on outbound sales called Outbound Sales, No Fluff. Husband and father of two. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today. Thrilled to have you here. So without any further ado, Ryan, let's open it up. Take us back to just briefly to your start over 16 years ago and what has been consistent as far as what you've seen all the way back then in 2008 until today when it comes to the phones.
Yeah, sure. So for those who have never kind of come across my content, just a very high level background of how I got started. So I actually went to college with the intention of being a teacher, no intention of getting into business, but came from a pretty rough area of Washington State. And when I went back home after completing school before I did my student teaching, realized that I probably wasn't going to be successful being back around my peers. Most of them were either on drugs or in jail, or some of them were dead already. And so it wasn't going to be a good fit for me. So I ended up stumbling down into San Francisco. A few of my friends had internships, and this was in 2008. And I realized that I probably should be there, not in Spokane. And so I called my school, said I'm not doing my student teaching, packed up my car. It's actually my parents' car, drove down to San Francisco, and the rest was history. I had to find work. Of course, what do you do in the middle of a financial crisis, which was 2008, and find work? You get a sales job. I guess that's what everyone was hiring in sales. So I stumbled into sales, and back then, just like now, the number one thing you do to start a sales conversation is to get people on the phone, right? You get people on the phone. And so there wasn't a lot of the fancy technology in 2008. There wasn't a lot of these fancy databases, right? What you had to do was literally research companies. This was better than prior to 2008 because at least it was the web. You'd research people, what companies based on their website, find a phone number, call the phone number and say, who's in charge of this? And that's how you built out your database, and you go after it. And so back then, what worked was calling people and getting them on the phone, having conversations. And what works today is the same thing. The difference is, if you actually look at the amount of time, energy, and effort it takes to get people on the phone, even with premium data, even with premium dialers, which we're talking about today, it actually seems like it's more difficult than it was back then. And that's because we have this issue with data and automation causing a lot of inefficiencies in our processes, right? So we believe today that we can pull a list of accounts and contacts that we want to sell into, but if you really examine the contact information that's being sold to you, the majority of it's garbage. And so you have to be able to have a system and a process to weed through that. And that's kind of what I've designed over the years, because I started with the foundation of, how do I sell? I want to get people on the phone. If I want to get people on the phone, where do I start? I start with companies I want to sell to, go to their website. Then I find the people within those companies who have problems I solve for, find them, make the list, know what to say, call the list, follow up. So that's the foundation of everything. I know we have a lot of time to get into a lot of it, but my background was started without a lot of automation and data. You had to build the list from scratch by literally researching companies only, calling in those companies, find those people. Today, we think we have more information, but the reality is we're almost overwhelmed with too much, and we've got to get back down to the fundamentals, right? And that's really what I've been trying to help people figure out over the last couple of years, after diving way too deep into the automation tech stack, and realizing that it's just full of fluff. And the sales, and I call it the sales acceleration industrial complex, is real. And a lot of us have been lied to over the last, especially 5 to 7 years. If you started your career, learning to sell via a sequencer, and you think that selling is grab data from ZoomInfo, throw it into Outreach, and then success is going to happen, you've been lied to.
Say that again. The sales
acceleration industrial complex.
Sales acceleration industrial complex. You know what? I had a plan for today, but I want to go there. Let's pull that thread real quickly before we do. If you do have questions that come up throughout this, Ryan's going to share a lot of deep insider information. If you have questions, use the Q&A feature in Zoom to list your question. If we have time at the end, we'll get to them. If not, we'll make sure to answer them at some point. Also, feel free to drop in the chat any other comments you might have. And if you want to tell us where you're tuning in from, feel free to tell us where that is in the chat. Just make sure you have it set to everyone. Well, the sales acceleration industrial complex, that is a hell of a term. Let's pull that thread real quickly. Is the current version of that, does that include things like Clay and AI and massive emailing? Have we just evolved, or does it actually work in terms of sales acceleration today compared to the previous version, which is, I know you fondly call them spam cannons, but the sales engagement platforms that you used to just load up. I used them, right? 2015, I was new as an SDR. I was terrified of the phone. In my first 3 months, I think I hung up on 2 people. And I was not afraid of just spamming people via email. And so I was using, at that time, it was, I think it's called Mail Yesware. And then eventually Outreach and then Sales Loft. So I know that was the previous version of it. And those SCPs are kind of hanging on by a thread. But does the current version, is it just an advanced version of the previous one with Clay and all these massive AI email writers, and this, you can open 100 domains and email thousands of people a day? Or is this the real deal?
The promise has always been, if you look at the evolution of all these solutions, it's like 10x, 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 right? But if you actually look at the data associated with rep production, we haven't seen any efficiency gains. So more data, more automation hasn't seen a one-to-one production per rep increase, right? So the promise has been, hey, get outreach. Instead of hiring 10 reps, you have one, you do 10x the activities, you get 10 times the results. Now, early on, when these solutions were coming to market, I used them as well. Like I said, I built a whole agency around integrating outreach into Connect and Sell, and the promise of doing 1,000 dials and 1,000 emails all from one rep in a day was, at a click of a button, was all there, right? In the beginning, it works because there's not as many people doing these strategies, but over time it becomes noise. And then what we're finding now is that with the rise of the actual channels themselves becoming more sophisticated around blocking these types of mechanisms, right? Email is difficult because you can't send more than a certain number of emails per domain, per time frame, per month, or per day, per month, etc. You'll get blocked. Same thing's happening with phone, as we know, right? You can't make too many dials from the same CID. You have to have a good connect rate. You have to have talk time, all this stuff. You're going to get blocked. The channels themselves are getting smarter with these automations aimed at combating this crap, right? And if you go back to an early rep trying to figure out, hey, I just want more conversations, it sounds like the promise of doing all this just to get the in-person to respond is valuable, but we forget about the people we're targeting. And if we forget about the people we're targeting, then what's the point? At the end of the day, you're not using these automations so that you can get that person to respond to an email or to get them onto the conversation. You're actually trying to have a meaningful engagement with them. And so when you forget about them and you're not paying attention to the number of people that are unsubscribing and marking you as spam and saying, and you kind of almost laugh off you see these posts about people look at this person who's so frustrated with my cold outreach. It's instead of inspecting yourself and saying oh, maybe I shouldn't be spamming so many people and I should be more thoughtful with my outreach, instead of joking about how this person over here got so frustrated about it, I might have a better experience. But with this rise of more data, more automation, it started with this idea of doing more activities. And then because of the more activities, the emailers, the dialers, et cetera, now you have these data companies coming on board saying, well, these more activities require more data, right? So they're fueling these systems with more data. And what you're finding is that the Clays, for example, hey, instead of one database, use all the databases, which is a great use case around, hey, let's make sure we have the right contact information for the first place. But why do these databases exist with 15 fucking phone numbers for one person, right? I don't want to buy 15 phone numbers. I want the number that reaches Ryan, not 15 numbers, right? But you can see how it fuels itself, right? You use the automation, you need more data. Most of these people will sell credits, or it's like it's a credit-based system. And so it just starts fueling itself with like, let's put more shit into the system, let's do more activity, and we're not seeing the results. We're not seeing the results. I haven't seen in the modern 2024 era anyway, an individual rep that is consistently hitting quota using pure automation, right? The ones that are hitting quota are taking a step back, being strategic with the counts they actually want to sell into, the people they want to sell into, and they're focusing on reaching people one-to-one, not at scale. And that's always been the best practice for sales. Everything else is
Absolutely.
marketing. Everything else is
Yeah.
marketing.
I love that distinction, Ryan. And you know what? Let's go back to something you touched on for a second when you were starting out, which is when you first started cold calling, you could call a company, find their number on the website. There was only one number to call, and you could ask for the person you wanted to get a hold of. Now that was not too long ago. 2008, sure, it was the bottom of the market. Things were rough in terms of what was happening from there. But from that time, you were a part of 3 company exits as a sales leader. And of the 4 companies that you've founded, 3 of them also had exits, including most recently, Phone Ready Leads was one that I think was your most recent one that you've exited, all based on the strategy that you're talking about right now. So clearly, there's something here that works deeply well, and for a long time, 16 years. Not to mention, you're an analytical guy. You're a thinker. You didn't mention this, but I know that one of the things you were studying when you went to school was math. And I know you had a career trajectory where you were thinking of going into the mathematics field. It takes a certain kind of brain, and you've applied that brain, whether you're going to admit it or not, you've applied that to your process to cold calling. I know you like to talk about the math of sales too, but bring that back to strategies that are still working today. You just started touching on it. There's 3 things I've heard you consistently say. The first one comes down to your list is the strategy. This bit about how I don't want 17 numbers, just give me the one. Like, I want the one number that actually gets a hold of the person I'm trying to target. Take us through at a high level. What are the steps that you've outlined in Outbound Sales No Fluff that you still use strategically to set a rep up for success, or a team up for success, or a company up for success?
Yeah, so what you're talking about is the process that I call buckets. So as a sales leader, early stage companies that I worked with, like, you study all of the sales methodologies, and you come up with some sort of process. Every company has their own sales process that usually starts at the meeting, right? So we have a very clear defined process from the time you and I sit across the table, if it's in person or virtually now, which is where more of these things happen. That's your stage 1 or stage 0, depending on how you qualify and move them into pipeline, right? And there's very clear stage definitions and exit criteria, right? You do discovery. If there's a fit, you move into demo. If there's a fit, there's a proposal and a close, or whatever it might be, right? You have your sales process. Very clear. Everyone's got their own methodologies, but very clear. There was never really a process or a methodology for how do I get people to that meeting, right? Prior to me creating buckets, I really haven't seen anyone really create clear stage definitions and exit criteria at the top of the funnel. It's mostly like, make a list, get the meeting. That's it. It's like, you have somebody on the list, you book a meeting. But the reality is there's multiple stages, just like you have in your sales process, before you can get a meeting, right? Not everybody, when you get them on the phone for the first time, is going to take a meeting. So how do you manage that process? And so buckets is a very easy, simple way to kind of create stage definitions and exit criteria at the top of the funnel that can be implemented and executed. And what it does is it helps reps become literally 2 to 3 times more productive within just a few passes on your list. And so the idea is there's 4 buckets. The first bucket is uncontacted. So this would include every account and every contact that you want to sell into. In order to be on that, it has to be inside your ICP. I call it a swim lane. If it's not, get it out, right? So if you're researching new accounts, they need to be qualified, they're in. contacts, they're in.
And I just want to emphasize that I don't think people understand how important that first step is. The criteria for what should go into your swim lane. Swim lane is Ryan's term for something is an ideal fit. I'm working with a client right now, and I was calling through some of their lists. I talked to 7 people yesterday. Of them, 6 of them were not a fit. That goes back to who the SDRs were bringing in to their list. If you're not starting with a high quality list, the right account and the right people, you're wasting time. And so I don't want this to slide by and everyone misses it. This is why Ryan likes to say list is the strategy. And correct me if I'm wrong here, because ultimately, if you're going to put in the elbow grease in the work, you only have so many hours in the day. Put those towards your highest quality, best fit accounts first. And I think this is easily missed for many of the SDR teams I've worked with in the tech world, in the B2B tech world, because they're just given access to a database. They're given, 1 day's worth of like basic training, and their manager says, okay, go build your list. They go, okay, sure. And what do? They pull everything in and they think it's activity that they need to hit. But then on the back end of that, they're not sure why they can have 20 conversations and only book 1 meeting. The average conversation to meeting rate, according to Cognism, is 4.8%. That is insanely low. And I think a big reason of that is because of this first step. So didn't want to interrupt your train of thought there because you were about to hit it. But that first step of like what goes into the uncontacted is already validated in terms of like, it's a good account, it's a good prospect.
Right. And I mean, it is the most important step. The list is the strategy. And again, it does get lost in the sauce, especially with the sales acceleration industrial complex, which is like, hey, more data, more automation. Let's just send and see what the fuck happens. Let's just throw it against the wall and see what sticks. But the first step you should take is actually reviewing the account. If you're a rep and you're in this process, right? It's in your CRM, your dialer, whatever it might be. Click to the website. Does it look like someone that you serve? Cool. Look at the profile of the person that you're trying to sell into. Now, most people are selling to people that have profiles on LinkedIn. So check their LinkedIn profile. Back in the day, we didn't have this. You just assumed based on the title, it was good to go. But is this the right title at the very least, or look at their profile? Cool. If that's good, move it forward. So if it's not, move it out. We're always moving forward or out. So uncontacted, right counts, right people. The next step in the process is you go from uncontacted to working. So to move into working, you have to have contact information for those individuals that fit that criteria. So we're all talking about the phone here. So we have phone numbers that we're going to start to work. In order to go from uncontacted to working, we have to attempt them. We attempt the numbers that we have for them. And we have to have a number that actually gets to either them, which is what we're really looking for, or a working voicemail. If I cannot get to the person or a working voicemail for that person from a number, get that number out. It's not
how many tries do you give it? How many tries?
1. I'm talking about 1 attempt across it. If I can't get to you, will you pick up, which isn't going to happen very often on the very first attempt, or a voicemail that works for that number. Like I get blocked by a gatekeeper. I can't get through a dial tree or something of that nature. The number's bad. Get that number out. That's what that's what makes it a workable number, working, right? So a number gets into working status. Now, in my book, I talk about the validation process. We don't have enough time to go through all this stuff, but there's a bunch of work you can do in here as well around figuring out how to optimize from uncontacted to working. It's also why I created phone ready leads. It's a fast pass to this stuff that'll get through a lot of this work, but you literally have to call every number, document the path, the outcome, all this stuff. There's way too much to cover in this session, but go read the book. It's free. It's on my profile. You can find it. Bucket.
And just to mention, everyone here will be getting a copy with Ryan's permission of the PDF. We're going to send everyone a copy of it. Thank you, Ryan, for offering that as well. So if you're here, you're going to get a copy of his book. I can't recommend reading it enough. It's not a long read, but it's a very transformative one.
So to get to working, you have to have a number that gets to either them or their voicemail that has a working record. Okay. Now you're working them. The next phase is priority. So priority is I've actually reached you. So in order to go from working to priority, I actually have to have a conversation with you. So I got to you. That moves you to a priority lead. Now I know I can reach you on the phone. We've had a conversation and you're still qualified. Like, I'm not DQing you. You're still a fit in my process. So this could be a yes, it could be a no, it could be not now, whatever, but you're a priority lead because you're in my ICP. Remember, you would have been out if you weren't. And now I've spoken to you and I've identified that I want to speak. I want to continue to speak with you. So that's a priority lead. The final step is again, meeting. So I finally got you to meet. So I have 4 clear definitions, right? Uncontacted, right people, working. I actually have contact information that if I do activity, it's not going to be a waste of time. Priority, you actually can be reached, and then scheduled, which is where we start our sales process. So those are the 4 buckets. The idea is you build these buckets up, and when you come as a rep to start your day, you work your buckets backwards. So if I don't have anything else to do today, then what I want to do is I want to confirm all the meetings I have scheduled that are coming up, right? Have they confirmed? Are they ready to go? That's where my money's made as an SDR. My meetings are good. Cool. Now that my meetings are scheduled, are all confirmed, I move into my priority leads. Who have I spoken to in the past who I haven't had a chance to, like I have a follow-up date now due. Like I spoke with them, the time was wrong. Now I'm following up with them, right? Those priority leads, by the way, people who have picked up, if my average connect rate was say 5% on a list cold, these are going to be like 25% on follow-up. Okay. So when I get to my priority bucket, I'm only calling people that I know pick up the phone and they are aware of me and what we have to offer because we've spoken before. And not only will I have maybe a 5x increase in my connect rate, my conversion rate to meeting is going to be about 2 to 3x. So if I schedule at that 5%, like you said, the cognizant number for 5% cold, I'm going to schedule it like 10 to 15% on these follow-ups. Okay. So that's what I want to do. I want to build my buckets to these priorities, and that's where the money's made, right? The fat stacks are in the circle bucks. I want to build this bucket to priority leads. These are people that are right
Fat
accounts, the
stacks
right
are what? Say
context.
that again slowly.
Fat stacks are in the circle backs.
In the circle backs.
In the
It's
circle
all
backs.
about the follow-up.
It's all about the follow-up. So I want to build my bucket to priorities. Again, right accounts, right contacts. I know I can get them on the phone. They now have some awareness of who I am and what I have to offer, and it's all about getting to timing. So we build our buckets to priorities. If I'm in a sales position, I want to get that bucket to be about a 50 to 100. Once I get there, I'm in my money zone, right? I'm 5x more productive in terms of getting to conversations when I sit down and call, and I'm 2 to 3 times more production into converting all day long. Now, we can't forget about still doing the working data because we have to backfill, just like in pipeline. If I move a deal, a record from priority to meeting, whatever my success rate is on booking meetings, I have to have the reciprocal of that. So say my success rate on booking meetings is 10%. That means I have to have 10 people to get one meeting. So if I need to get one meeting scheduled, I need to have 10 people that I can call and have conversations with. If I book one of those, I don't replace one of them. I have to replace 10 of them. Right. So that's where the working bucket comes in, and I have to keep backfilling. I have to go get new conversations into my priorities. I want to keep my priorities in this like 50 to 100 at any given time. If I get there, I'm in my winning zone. That's where you start to see this promise of reps actually being not 10x more productive, but 3 to 5 times more productive at scale without having to use automation, without having to use auto dialers, etc. It's all about just following this methodology. Make a list, know what to say, call the list, and follow up. And that's where you start to see this bucketing process work. And at the end of the day, it doesn't require automation. It doesn't require all this, robo spam cannon stuff. It's just a process that if you implement and start using today, you will, within a very short period of time, if you follow this methodology, work the buckets, literally within 2 to 3 months, you will start seeing this massive increase in your productivity.
Ryan, you are literally giving everyone here a masterclass, at least a mini masterclass on the strategic approach for successful cold calling, and it still works. This is going to continue to work into next year as well. We have a ton of questions. Ryan, we're going to have you back, and maybe I can get public commitment in front of everyone that we'll do a part 2 to this, because there's so much here that I know the audience would love to get into. If we don't get to your question, if you don't have an opportunity to get what you're looking for clarified, please feel free to follow Ryan on LinkedIn, DM him. I hope that's okay, Ryan, that I just gave everyone permission to do so. I do want to get to 1 or 2 questions, whatever we have time for, and I'm going to do it in order, or if I saw any that look like they're pretty repetitive here. The first one is about your approach when you're actually reaching out to people. So the question is, do you use a method for personalizing your message when you're cold calling people? This is more about your scripting, what you're saying.
Yeah. So everything should be campaign focused, right? So one list of similar accounts, one list of similar personas within those accounts with a problem or solution or whatever your offer is going to be. So one list, one message, one offer. alignment from a campaign perspective as I start to work my buckets. And the initial conversation should be scripted and personaized, not personalized, right? So it should be based on the persona, based on a problem that you know that people that are generally working with companies like theirs in roles like theirs may have. You understand their current state and you're offering a desired future state, right? So the idea there is your first attempt on a contact should be personalized, and then you move from persona to personal. So once I've actually reached you and I know you are that person in this role and you've got some information from your initial core message, that's when you move into more personalization with follow-up. And again, the reason why you want to do that is that initial go through that list, you're going to have a much lower connect rate. You don't even know if they're yet the right person, and there's even any interest of what you have to do anyway. So it's like an advertising unit, right? And if you have that message consistent, you can measure it and understand what's working, what's not working, and make adjustments. So I have a whole framework that I run that's 70-80% the same for everybody. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter who I'm calling for. The only difference is obviously the value proposition or the pitch component of it, of what I'm trying to desire, the information I'm gathering. And I know based on the ratios of how I get through the phone, if I'm on track or not, and then I can make my adjustments. So persona to personal. Once I actually connected with you, I'm not going to script the next conversation in my follow-up because I now know you pick up the phone. I've got some information from the initial call, even if it's just you were busy, doesn't really matter. I can then take the time to get a little bit deeper into asking more personalized questions outside of my persona-based message if I wanted to, knowing that I can get you on the phone over and over and over again. I can start to work that. But I focus on one general core offer to an initial list of folks, and I'm not deviating from that in that initial call. I only start to personalize with follow-up.
I love the way you just said that, persona to personal. You don't, and the thinking that I've had when I've understood this from your process is you don't want to waste your time if you're never going to get a hold of the person doing anything that's personalized that takes an extra second. It's just not worth it. However, once you validated that it's the right person, they answer the phone, you now have a use case for why you should be a little bit more personal. Maybe start doing some research, use one of the AIs out there to like understand their 10K reports and talk about initiatives. We're pretty much up with time here. I want to let everyone know.
Well, I want to make a note on that real quick. I know we're up on time, but
yeah,
super important because most people think this is Eminem 8 Mile. One shot, one opportunity, mom's spaghetti, whatever that line is, right? It's not. So if all you get in the first conversation, it is the right person at the right company, and they do not want to talk to anyone who didn't do their research, great. Now you know they picked up the phone. And so wait a couple weeks. You didn't blow the opportunity. Do your research and follow up, and you're going to get a better shot on goal. And by the way, even if that fails, right person at the right company, you just keep following up. You just keep trying. So I want to make that note. Like most people think that they only have this one shot, but what you're trying to do is gather information, build some awareness, and you're building your buckets for future follow-ups. And that's the key here. Once you know they pick up the phone, they're going to pick up the phone again, and you can start to move towards that personalized follow-up when appropriate. And it's not appropriate in the very beginning because you don't even know if they pick up the phone in the first place.